Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. 2023 is over. The new year has begun. And with that said, it's time to recollect on a year's worth of music. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the HMZ Top 10 Albums of 2023.
Oh, wait, huh? What's that? No. Oh, no. Oh, no, it's July. I made the video too late. Ah! Kicking it off at number 10, we got your boy George Clinton with Urap-Aya. I'd been looking forward to this album for a while, 5 years to be exact, since his last solo album in 2018, Slide. His music harkens back to 90s electronica and dance pop. You can point to a lot of genres and styles that embody what George is doing, but not really any bands or artists in particular, at least not from that time period. Nowadays, George Clinton fits into the modern-day alternative music sphere like a glove, while still managing to stand out from everyone else. For one, the synth textures on this thing are immaculate. On the song Punching Down, you have this squelching acid bass line which contrasts with these synth leads that sound like little pixies. On the song I've Been Young, there's this incredibly subtle synth pad which acts as a springboard for the lead piano melody. On the flip side of that, George sounds way more confident as a vocalist than I've ever heard him before. As opposed to previous albums of his where he just kind of blends into the background like a chameleon, George sounds front and center on this album, and I couldn't be happier with the results. If you're looking for an album that's pillowy, hazy, nostalgic, and a little groovy, you're gonna like this one. Coming in at number 9, we got Galactic Hole with Piracy's Menu. Galactic Hole is someone who I've been keeping an incredibly close eye on in music for years at this point. Actually, that's only half true. He's more or less the reason I got into music in the first place. Watching his mashups all the way back in 2016 made me realize the potential for music and what one could do with it. Since then, I've listened to hundreds of albums and made hundreds of hours of music of my own, and kept up with the other music-related news that I wouldn't care about otherwise. Throughout all of his endeavors, I felt like he's been able to evolve consistently as a producer without one-upping himself, leaving each phase of his career as enjoyable as it was when it first occurred. Videos of his like You Reposted in Everyone's Neighborhood and Maximal Mashup Megamix have such an important place in my brain that very little has managed to top. That said, I've never been too much a fan of his albums. While I generally enjoy his mashup works, and I thought his album No, You Shut Up was chocked full of potential, not many of his projects have really gripped me front to back until this year when he dropped Piracy's Menu. This album is a behemoth of samples from start to end that finds a way to make the experience feel busy yet smooth. Each song is so jam-packed with samples that singling out individual moments is futile, as every moment feels like a highlight. Yet it all flows so seamlessly, preventing any of it from becoming insanely overwhelming, while still being really stimulating. The influence from classics in sample-based genres is very present, I mean how could it not be? And yet Galactic manages to make it all distinctly his. Not a moment on here feels like it came from any other artist, and I feel like that's a result of Galactic's longevity and experience in not just the mashup scene, but in music in general, both as a creator and a consumer. Coming in at number 8, we got My Name Is by What Is Your Name? I came across this album on my endless endeavor to find the greatest, most obscure, most artful album ever made. And, well, it's not that. I think it's very good regardless. What this album manages to do, I think better than a lot of other indie rock albums from this year, or hell, this decade, is pull off a lot of the trademark indieisms in a way that feels more reminiscent of a band like Boredoms than an artist like Rex Orange County. This album, in a lot of ways, is like a butterfly, in that it starts out very simple, very rudimentary, but it undergoes a lot of various changes throughout its runtime, and by the end, it's almost a completely different album. To start off the album is the song It's Okay, which manages to fit in a chamber ensemble into Midwest emo, all of which is very, very compressed. The song Such a Soulless Lover has this incredibly distorted guitar passage, which contrasts with everything else in the mix to a jarring extent. The song Am I Alone, or Just Crazy, starts off with a guitar that is feedbacked and looped and delayed to an effect that makes it sound a lot more electronic than it really is. But near the halfway point, the song becomes more breezy and and uplifting, as if it's taking off the ground after a running start. I will say though, if there is one quality about this album that can be a bit of a turnoff to new listeners, it's that the mixing and recording quality can impede on some of the performances, to the point where some of them may seem more try-hard than passionate. But regardless, if you're looking for an indie album that's as equal parts DIY as it is grandiose, I'd highly recommend this album right here. Coming in at the number 7 spot on this list, we have Joanna Sternberg with I've Got Me. Joanna is an artist who I wouldn't normally gravitate towards under normal circumstances. Not for any personal reasons, of course, I don't know Joanna, but I don't really gravitate towards folk as much as I do genres like electronic or hip-hop. And I think if this album did anything for me, it's proved that I should definitely listen to more folk. I've Got Me is a very bittersweet album. On one hand, the instrumentation is very soft, it's very inviting, it's very warm, and Joanna's voice sounds like that of a little old woman's, which is easily the most technically impressive thing about this album when you consider that Joanna is only 32 years old. However, on the flip side of all that, I've Got Me is an album dealing with Joanna's relationships, and more specifically, how Joanna has broken up from each of those relationships, and with each relationship breaking up, Joanna hates themselves a little more and more. By the way, if anyone's wondering why I keep referring to Joanna as them, I just found out during the research of this video that Joanna is non-binary and goes by they, them pronouns. So good job, Joanna. Yeah, Joanna. Anyways, bit aside, Joanna really hates their partners. On songs like People or Toys to You, Joanna goes into excruciating detail on how basically all of her partners are manipulative and just the worst people, and how she was able to finally build the courage to say, no, you are a dick. You have ruined my life. You make me hate myself. You are not worth my time. Get out of my face. This theme pretty much persists throughout the entire album, and from front to back, I'm just cheering them on, like, yeah, you go. Tell them. If you're looking for a singer-songwriter album with just the right amount of drama without making it too complicated or overwhelming, I'd highly give this a shot. Alright, I've been waiting for this one. At number 6, we got the legend, the GOAT, Blank Banshee with 4D. Let's go! Blank Banshee has been one of my favorite artists for as long as I could remember. His blend of vaporwave, trap music, and various other forms of electronic dance music has been incredibly appealing to me. I can remember giant chunks of my life just waiting for the next Blank Banshee album, as he's been making music for well over 10 years now and only managed to put out about 5 albums. His newest album right here, 4D, is by far his most abrasive and adventurous album to date. And this can entirely be attributed to his incorporation of industrial styles of dance music. For example, the track Scud has these intense, pounding techno hits, which are accompanied very nicely with these various metallic percussive hits. The same could also be said for the track Pegasus, which again also has those intense techno kicks, but instead is paired with a kind of dark dubstep twist. On the flip side of that, you have the song Lost Angles, which has a New Jack swing beat. Hold on. I'm reading this in my notes, and hold on, let me listen to the song again. I want to make sure I'm not making this up. Huh, I guess I wasn't lying, huh? I guess that really does happen in the album. Wow. Overall, if you're looking for an EDM album that's got a bit more kick and something different to offer than most EDM, you're not going to be disappointed. This thing was awesome. Just take it from me, a white guy. A white guy with a disc coming out of my mouth.
Also, shout out to Ricard Carlson for the visuals for that. They weren't an official music video, but he made it, so shout out to him. Give his channel a watch.
At number 5 on the list, we got none other than Yamari with Phantasy Star. Yamari is a fairly obscure artist. On SoundCloud, they only have around 300 followers, which really isn't too much considering internet numbers these days. However, I think they deserve way more, and this album is a shining example as to why. Phantasy Star is a whopping 20 tracks, and I don't think it gets dull between any of them. This is due to the sound of the album, which is simultaneously murky and kaleidoscopic at the same time. The wheel isn't being reinvented here, but Yamari does make a damn good wheel. This whole thing is a smorgasbord of sounds that have been bubbling in the underground rap scene for years, with a dash of hyperpop aesthetics for good measure. From the bouncy distortion of songs like Say So, I Don't Know, to the menacing euphoria of songs like Tell Me When to Think. This thing has some serious variety. I mean, there's even some borderline ambient pop on the song Dwarf Star Lullaby. I was really surprised by the quality and magnitude of this album, and as a result, it's become one of my favorite trap albums of all time. Coming in at number 4, we have the Lemon Twigs with Everything Harmony. If any of the albums thus far have been a bit too new gen for your taste, then boy do I have the album for you. Everything Harmony is a throwback to the 60s. We're talking Beatles, we're talking Beach Boys, we're talking a little bit of what would be known as soft rock. And when I mean throwback, I don't mean just a subtle nod to the 60s or the 70s. I'm talking about getting in a time machine and going back to the summer of love. I'm talking soft rock, I'm talking Baroque pop, I'm talking folk pop. I'm talking psychedelic pop, okay? This thing has it all. On top of that, this thing also has the songwriting chops to back it up. And if you told me that this was an album from the late 60s, I'd believe you. Songs like Corner of My Eye sound like they could have been made by the Fab Four themselves. I don't really have much else to say. This thing's freaking awesome. Coming in at number 3, we have Utopia by Travis Scott. Woo! If you've been paying attention to the music industry over the past 10 years, then Travis Scott should not be a new name to you. But personally, I think that his whole discography is criminally underrated within the larger online music community. Of course, he has his fair amount of dick riders, as is to be expected with any artist of his caliber, but within the music circles that I'm in, I feel like Travis Scott kind of just is pushed off to the side and kind of remembered in some aspects, like, oh yeah, he was good on that album, or he had this cool feature. Honestly, I thought this right here would have been the album to sway people, but I guess it really didn't. But I thought it would. Mostly because this album really sees Travis flexing his creative muscles in a way that we've never seen him do it before. A lot of the cuts on here feature beats that would not have worked on any other Travis Scott album by a long shot. While it's true that Travis Scott isn't the only artist with the kind of vision to do something like put Dave Chappelle and Young Lean on a song together, but who else has done that? He's not the only artist who would do something like start a song with a sample of a Yes song, followed by a beat that sounds like a fusion of boom bap and psychedelic folk, but who else has done that? Travis is not an experimental hip-hop artist by any means, but he is an innovative one. Travis is one of the very few people operating on his level that have the creativity, vision, and talents to pull off something like Utopia, and yet he pulled it off. First come, first serve, and my boy served. Narrowly missing the number 1 spot, we have my number 2 spot, 10,000 gecs by 100 gecs. 100 gecs, very established, very influential, but rarely respected. Once you know them, you either love them or hate them, and I happen to love them. Their first album, 1000 gecs, was an incredibly quirky mixture of rap, pop, electronic music, and some other stuff for good measure. It was loud, it was energetic, and it was chipmunk to all hell. It was so unique that it accidentally started the entire genre of what we know today as hyperpop. So imagine my shock when the next album is just a full-blown rock album. Well, not full-blown, but they've definitely turned the rock dial up and the hyperpop dial down a little bit. It's still as nutty and quirky as their last album, but it's nowhere near as in-your-face as before. This whole album consists of the Gecs playing around with styles of eras bygone, whether that be the nu metal of Limp Bizkit, the ska of, I don't know, ska. I don't listen to ska. I don't know. Or the pop punk of Green Day. This album is as eclectic as like a Beck album, and I think that speaks to the dedication that 100 gecs have to not only their music, but their image. If this album proves anything, I think it proves something about their fans. No matter how eclectic their fans are, 100 gecs will always be one step ahead of them. Alright, this is already half a year late. We're gonna do it. Number 1. The number 1 album of 2023 is Space Heavy by King Krule. I'm just going to cut to the chase. This album's in my number 1 spot. This album is lovely. It's an incredibly mellow sounding album. It's very gentle. It's got even saxophone lines that are incredibly smooth and relaxing. But at the same time, this album is incredibly raw. King Krule has a very distinct vocal style that's incredibly untrained, but also very appealing at the same time. There's a punk-like trait to how his vocals aren't always on key and even break out into just yelps, but still they blend in nicely with the very luscious instrumentation around him. The result is a vibe that is akin to finding an audio diary of someone who's finally getting over depression, but is still a little shaken, like a soldier that's relieved that the war is over, but now has to reconcile with the loss of his comrades. That said, it's not a very inaccessible album. I feel like anyone could pop this on, get over the vocals pretty quickly, and have a good time regardless, as I've had many times with this album in 2023. This has been my top 10 albums of 2023. I'm HMZ, signing out.